It has been requested quite a lot, so here's a video about wildlife editing with Lightroom. We're going to turn this raw file into this final image, and if you want to follow along, you can find the raw file in the description of this video. So let's begin. What we can do to improve this image is to kind of separate the subject from the background to make it pop. And that is usually done with masking, but before we do that, we need to do the basic adjustments as always. So let's open up the basic panel, and right away this image is a little bit too bright for me. So what I'm going to do is to bring down the exposure slightly. I'm also going to bring down the highlights, and this will mostly recover some detail in the fur of that tiger. So right around here looks good. This spot especially is a little bit problematic with a bit of overexposure, but I think like this it's okay. Also, I'm going to bring down the shadows, which will add some punch to this shot. And let's also bring down the blacks. Very careful here to not underexpose anything. But right around here looks great. This adds some really nice contrast. I do think I also want to increase the whites a bit for further contrast. Okay, so the whole image got a lot darker. What I want to do next, I want to adjust the white balance. I do have a feeling this shot is a little bit too cold, so I want to bring up the temperature, introducing more warmth, just like this. Okay, and then let's also make the image sharp and clear by bringing up the texture. I'm also going to bring up the clarity and the dehaze. Wonderful. So right at this point, what I really don't like is the intense color covering everything. So I want to bring down the vibrance very slightly and later on introduce colors on specific areas of the image. But first, let's do a little bit of masking, and that's where we separate the tiger from the background. So let's head into the masking panel, and what I want to do right away is to generate a background mask. This will roughly select the background, leaving the subject alone. However, this mask is spilling a little bit into the subject. So again, just like with those AI sky masks, what we can do to refine the mask is to click on those three dots, choose intersect mask with, and choose select background. This will not make the mask perfect, but it will be much better than before. And if you want, we can still manually change the mask a little bit. So I'm going to say subtract, and here I'm choosing the brush tool. And with the brush selected, I just want to carefully get rid of a few areas which are rather important to the image. Very carefully, yeah. Okay, but I think that looks great. Now that we have the background selected, I am going to make it darker, and I'm doing this by simply bringing down the exposure first. And what this will do is this will greatly help to separate the subject from the background, as you can see. Now I can improve this further by blurring the background. Therefore we can bring down the texture and thus just make it softer. And we can also bring down the clarity. Doing this, you just need to watch out you don't accidentally affect some details of that tiger. Especially those finer hairs would look a little bit strange if they suddenly would become blurry. But I think that looks good for now. So in this part right here, with the tiger's ear in front of that bright background is still not separated enough for my taste. So what I'm doing here is I'm going to choose a radial gradient. And with this radial gradient, what I want to do is to just cover this bright top area like this. And of course, we need to get rid of that tiger from that mask. So I'm going to say subtract, and let's choose select subject. That seems to be working pretty good. So what I want to do in here is to very heavily bring up the exposure. It doesn't really matter if this area is overexposed, since we don't have any details to worry about in here. Just like this. I do also want to bring up the shadows and the blacks. And I do think I want to bring up the whites. Okay, that looks good. I do think I need to readjust the radial gradient, bringing it up just a little bit. And just like that, with this one mask, we have added some very nice separation between the two things. Wonderful. Okay, so now it's time to work on the subject. I want to create a select subject mask for this, and again I want to have a more precise edge, so I'm going to click on those three dots, go to intersect mask with and choose select subject. Again, this is far from perfect, but for this purpose it should be fine. I want to further specify this mask by clicking on those three dots one more time, choose intersect mask with, and then I'm choosing a radial gradient. And the reason is because I just want to cover pretty much the face of the tiger like this. And I think this should be good enough. What I want to do in here now is to bring up the exposure, making the tiger a little brighter. And I also want to bring up the contrast. I want to bring up the shadows. And I want to bring up the temperature just to add some more yellowish tones to this face. And then we can add a little more punch by increasing clarity and texture. Okay, that looks great. Then I do want to add one linear gradient coming in from the right side. I just want to make this part a little darker by bringing down the exposure. And thus we're kind of focusing the attention towards the face of the image by darkening the edges, just like with vignetting. Okay. Let's use a radial gradient covering this eye, and I'm going to increase the clarity here a bit, making the eye a little more interesting. Wonderful. Now one more thing we can do to further separate the subject from the background is we're going to create another background mask, and let's intersect it with itself one more time for a more precise edge. And then I want to see if I can bring down the white balance temperature to add some very cool separation between those two. I think that looks great. So I'm happy with how this is looking so far. Now that's the image after the masking adjustments, and that's the image before we applied any masks. So you can see a clear difference. Much better. Looking at the histogram, we do have a little bit of underexposure going on, but that is just in those not important background areas, so we don't have to worry about that. Okay, then let's do a little bit of color grading. Not much going on here. I just want to start in the color mixer. And what I want to do here is I want to work on the hue, which means I'm going to slightly bring down the orange hue. And I'm also going to bring down the yellow hue. I have a feeling the fur color is a little bit off, so I'm trying to fix that by adjusting the hue. Okay, that looks much better. And then let's head over into the saturation tab. And here I want to bring up the orange tones. At the same time, I want to bring down the yellow tones. And this way, the orange part of the fur will pretty much stay orange, as you can see, but those white patches will become a purer white, which I think looks great. So right around here looks good to me. Now I also want to head into the color grading panel for the highlights on which I want to apply a warm color tone. So let's set up the hue, going with something warm like this. And I want to bring up the saturation very, very gently. Not going too crazy with this, just around here looks perfect. Okay, almost done. I also want to head into the effects tab to add a little bit of vignetting. Just around here. And then let's head into the calibration tab. And I want to bring down the blue primary hue because I just love how this looks. And I'm going to bring up the saturation as well. Now that looks great. So this image was shot at ISO 6400, which means we can see a little bit of noise. If you want, we could use Lightroom's AI Denoise tool. So let's go into the details tab and just click the Denoise button. If you have performance issues with the AI Denoise, you could try applying this at the beginning before applying any editing and maybe make your workflow a little bit faster. So this seems to work pretty good according to the preview. I'm not going to change anything here. I'm just going to hit enhance. Okay, it really does take a lot longer when you have AI masks involved in this denoise process, so at this point I really recommend doing this at the beginning of the editing process, because I'm waiting now for more than 5 minutes, which is time wasted. Alright, and here we have it. Looks much better. So the last thing to do in Lightroom would be the sharpening, and for that I'm going to drop the radius, increase the details, add a bit of masking. I'm holding down the Alt key here so I can see where the sharpening is applied, and then I'm going to bring it up a notch. That looks wonderful. And that's the finished image. Now you could apply some cropping to it. I'm not sure if I'm going to do it, maybe later on. For now, I'm quite happy with how this wildlife edit looks. If you have any questions, but also if you have anything to add to help improve my wildlife editing workflow, let me know in the comments, and thank you so much for watching this video.